Todah lecha, Todah lecha, uv'chol yom azamera ki liman chastecha niranina. Todah lecha, Todah lecha.
Shalom, I'm David Harris, and welcome to a very special JBS tribute to Rabbi Mark S. Golub. So much more than the founding president and CEO of JBS, and of course the beloved host of its most popular series. From the Aleph Bet was one of them, for anyone of any age to learn to read and understand the Hebrew language. And another, Jewish 101, where he taught lessons on the Midrash, the rabbinic interpretations and commentaries that Mark felt were the beating heart of Jewish teaching. And then there was Witness, his series that gave a platform to Holocaust survivors and their unfiltered, intimate storytelling of their harrowing experiences. And then there was In the News and other analysis programs where Mark's inimitable interview style would leave absolutely no stone unturned on any issue relating to American Jewry and to the State of Israel. And believe me, as I'm sure you know, Mark was a passionate, lifelong defender of the State of Israel. I was interviewed on his news programs many times. I saw it up close. I admired it always.
Jewish Education and Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program.
And of course, there was L'Chaim, the flagship talk show that started as a radio program way back in 1979.
Rabbi Mark Golub.
Speaking with the likes of legendary figures such as Isaac Bashevis Singer, Elie Wiesel, Abba Eben, Mark began introducing American Jewry to, as he said, the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. And he did so through an intimate, in-depth interview format before anyone else was doing it. L'Chaim ran continuously for over 40 years, 4 decades, can you imagine? And as a program that ranged from arts and entertainment to anti-Semitism, to Israeli politics and culture, and of course, religious issues. And that big question, the question of belief in God, which Mark never shied away from.
I'm assuming that you do not mean that you imagine God as person. But I don't want to lead you. Is God a person?
He's experienced as a person.
Does God have a body?
According to Maimonides, no.
L'Chaim is an all-encompassing emblem of Mark's lifelong work. Put quite simply, Mark was a visionary of Jewish media. And JBS, this JBS, was the embodiment and culmination of his life's work as a rabbi, as an educator, as a lover of all things Jewish. Tonight, for the very first yahrtzeit, the first anniversary of his passing, we remember and honor Mark. We remember his charisma. We remember his insatiable curiosity. We remember his singular signature approach to leading conversations for and about the Jewish people and our Jewish traditions. We remember his extraordinary knowledge and erudition. Wow, he could take conversations in many directions, and he did. And always with the same level of expertise, penetrating analysis, and deeply felt passion. For me, personally, Mark was a friend of many years, and I had countless opportunities to interact with him. And I can tell you, in all my years, there were few people I met who were as warm and as gracious, who made you feel that you were the only person in his life when he spoke with you. And he always did so graciously, so kindly, so warmly, and of course, so intelligently. So in this tribute of JBS, you'll be hearing from former L'chaim guests and JBS hosts about what it was that made Mark so special for each and every one of them. What's the legacy we want to preserve here? What are the lessons of his teaching, his boundless energy for the Jewish people through this medium of television that will help us carry on as best we can in his honor and to protect his legacy? And now, please enjoy, maybe with a smile, perhaps with a tear, remembering Mark S. Golub.
I first met Mark when I came to be interviewed at JBS for the job of news anchor. This was in 2012, and we just clicked. He told me about what the job required and what he was looking for, and I just said to him, I think I'm the perfect person for this. And it wasn't out of arrogance that I said this or even confidence. I just knew this, me and Mark, me and JBS, was the right fit. I think Mark had a way of making people feel that they were special, that they were of value, and that they were who he wanted to be talking to at that moment. He was kind, he was funny, and so smart, and always had something to say that was often truly thought-provoking and unique. A unique voice in the Jewish world that cared deeply about the Jewish world. And he was larger than life. And he had more energy than most anyone I know. Because I think he was fueled by his passion, by that caring, by that connection to and love for Judaism, for the Jewish experience, for our history as a people, for Israel, calling himself always an Ohev Israel, a lover of Israel and of the Jewish people. Todah lecha. Thank you, Mark, for all of that. We miss you. And we are all committed to doing our best to carry on your incredible legacy.
If somebody said to me, Mark, what do you do? Or do you do television? I do not do television. I am not in the television business. I am in the Ohev Yisrael business. I am a lover of Israel. In the double meaning of the word Israel. I love the Jewish people. Anywhere in the world, I love the Jewish people. And I love the state of Israel. And I believe our job, Shalom TV, RTN, and Rage, is to explain better to every American Jew what the genius of the Jewish tradition is, the power of the Jewish community and the Jewish people is, and the wondrous miracle of Israel today. That's my mission. Israel is a work in progress. What country isn't? What society isn't? No one should say that Israel is perfect in the Greek sense of perfect. But in the Jewish sense of perfect, Israel is remarkable. What is for you, Shachar, the special quality? And I've talked already about the Jewish people, Israeli people. When you try to explain to others what the unique character of the Israeli people and the Jewish state is, what do you point to?
The unyielding optimism and problem solving. The fact that no amount of pain will bring us down. That in times of great hardships that we experience in our lifetime, when the terrorist attacks took place or when bad things happen, people carry about their business as usual, to build, to create, to develop, never losing the opportunity for a smile, even though it might sometimes live in parallel with great pain. Mm-hmm. That is the resilience of a people, a nation, an idea, an ideology.
Oh, that's lovely.
I first got to meet Mark when I assumed position as Consul for Media Affairs for Israel in New York, a job that's truly frustrating when you think about spreading the word for Israel. And I'll never forget the first thing that Mark told me. You know, Shachar, you and Israel will always have an open door right here at JBS. That moment, I fell in love. I knew that I was standing before somebody who's larger than life, somebody whose heart for the people of Israel, for the Jewish people, is as big as I can ever imagine. I got to interact with Mark over the years, always enjoyed his unbelievable spirit, that childish look in those eyes filled with energy and love and passion, the eagerness of a 6-year-old to learn, to grow, to do, that burst of energy, that unbelievable personality, that voice that keeps on rolling in my ears. Metsuyan, Metsuyan, that's exactly the way we want to go moving forward. Working alongside Mark, maintaining his commitment to do more for the Jewish community as a whole, to bring everyone together. No matter if we agree or disagree, we can all sit together and hold on to what unifies us as a people, as a nation. That to me is Mark. His voice, his decree, his legacy. A tribute to Mark. A tribute to Mark is not a moment's thing or even a program's thing. A tribute to Mark is to live through his vision and his ideals, to do good by the people of the state of Israel and by the Jewish people. You know, Israelis as a whole are very sensitive to what the world thinks of us. And anyone who extends a loving hand and an embrace in support of Israel and the Jewish people touches and resonates through the souls of many. So did Mark Golub, resonated through the hearts of so many Israelis, through the souls of so many of us who understood and cared for his compassion, love, and admiration. Mark shall forever live within each and every one of us who cares for Jewish unity and for the Jewish people. And his legacy and the work that JBS does will stand forever as a monumental, perpetual, eternal tribute to who Mark Golub was and is.
Israel is family. Whenever you get off a plane in Israel, you feel at home. I feel at home. As much as I love the United States of America, and this is my home, there is a feeling of home in Israel as well. I hope any of you who have not been to Israel yet, that you make a concerted effort to visit this extraordinary country of extraordinary people. And of course, it's always about people. The most important thing in the Jewish tradition is other people. How you treat other people is paramount. Everything else is commentary. Having said that, I want a good Jew to begin by being a good mensch, but I don't want to end there. I don't want people to come on the holidays and hear Mark Golub and go away thinking, Mark only wants me to be a good person. But when I say want, it's not about what I want. I feel I am conveying the message of a Jewish tradition that I am just one little speck in a long chain, and the only difference between me and the congregation is not that I'm any better. I'm not any better than anybody in that room.
Right.
But they have their expertise is in what they've studied. And they know things in their professional life and in their hobbies I have no knowledge of. This is my life. The only reason I have a right to speak for the Jewish tradition is that this is what I care about 24 hours a day and what I've spent a great deal of my life studying. And if they listen to me, it's not because I want them to think I'm a better person, because I'm not. And I'm not a wiser person than many of the people in that room. The one thing I can do is, though, I can bring to them a perspective of the Jewish tradition that they want to hear. then they should do with it whatever they want. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, but I think what we have to, the fact of placing certain mitzvot at the head of the list. Hi, I'm Rabbi Joshua Hammerman from Temple Beth El in Stamford, a frequent guest of Mark's here at this table, and this table feels so empty without him here. When Mark interviewed someone, and when he interviewed me, he would say, consider not that this isn't a table where an interview is taking place, but that we're sitting around on a Shabbos afternoon, having coffee or a glass tea, perhaps, and just shooting the breeze. And that's how I felt about Mark when he interviewed me, that I was sitting around the Shabbos table. In fact, this was America's Shabbat table, where Mark conducted some of the most brilliant conversations with some of the leading figures in Judaism and Jewish life, really of the whole person, of the passionate person, the wonderful person that he was. He was a pioneer in so many ways, and he and I had a lot in common, although we had a lot in common in slightly different ways. He was a pioneer of electronic media. He was really one of the greats of the American Jewish television and radio scene.
I'm at Columbia, and I love media. And I go to WKCR. KCR is the campus station at Columbia, but it's unique in that the FM station broadcasts throughout the entire greater metropolitan New York area. So it is a city station as opposed to a campus station. And I wanted to do a program where I would interview a rabbi and some representative of the Christian tradition on a specific topic.
And what was unusual about it was that this was an interview and commentary program on matters of Jewish concern.
Approaching to religious concepts was a very exciting and formative experience for me, and it became the longest-running interview program in WKCR's history, and I'm very, very proud of it.
Whereas I got my journalism degree along with my rabbinic ordination, and I worked in the print media. I wrote for the Jewish Week for 25 years as a columnist, essays for the New York Times, so we went in very different directions, but I admired so much his mastery of this media. No one was better. In another way, we were also very similar and somewhat different. We, of course, were both rabbis in Stamford, Connecticut. When I arrived in the late 1980s, we were two of the younger people on the block, but we had very different congregations. I was sort of the old school or old shul rabbi of a large, typical congregation, and he was a chavurah rabbi. Now, if I were Mark right now, I'd go into a very detailed but very clear explanation of what chavurah is, and I think it's important to know because he was a pioneer of the chavurah movement. So I'm not going to go into that much detail, except to say that in the late 60s, as the counterculture took hold, people tended to shy away from the large institutions that were old-fashioned synagogues and the model that they presented, and they instead were looking for something much more intimate, much more passionate and small. These fellowships were called, the Hebrew word, chavurot. And Mark was one of the pioneers of that movement, the chavurah movement. And in fact, he also pioneered a great periodical that came out of that period called Shema, a journal of Jewish responsibility, which was created by the great Eugene Borowitz, one of his teachers, one of his great teachers at Hebrew Union College.
I had this idea in '69 to publish a small journal, Time magazine called it, part of the underground press. And I needed help with it. So there was Mark, and I knew of his interests and so on. And Mark became the assistant editor. And we carried it through the early years until the magazine got established. And then of course, he had to go on to other things. But, of course, those times are unforgettable and very special.
And in addition to WKCR, you also worked at WMCA. Your show was carried on WOR. These are two of the stations that I looked upon as the great heritage radio stations out of New York City. I dreamed of working at them.
We both have the same emotional reactions to those names. I was so lucky, Jeff. I'm ordained in 1972, and through my rabbinic work, and I've been already the assistant editor of Shema magazine, and I did a lot of writing for Shema magazine, and it was seen by the president of WMCA Radio. And when I was ordained a rabbi, Peter Strauss called me and said, "Look, Mark, I know you have a love of the Jewish tradition, but I know you also love radio. Would you consider joining me at WMCA as the editorial director and director of public affairs for WMCA Radio?" Well, here comes our Peter Strauss asking me, do I want to become an editorial director of the leading talk station in America? It had nothing to do with being Jewish. It was a secular position. And I grabbed it in a heartbeat.
I was doing the sports show and at WMCA. And anyway, Mark was the public affairs director of WMCA. And I liked his personality. He was very funny and a very good outlook on life. It was a while later that I learned that he actually was a rabbi. He didn't talk about it, and he didn't really want it mentioned, which tells you a little bit about Mark. He didn't want to come in with that august title as a member of the cloth.
I become the substitute host for giants like Barry Gray and Barry Farber, who I used to listen to late at night. I get chills as I tell you the story, Jeff. And it was just dumb luck and a little bit of ability, but it had to be luck. I was in the right place at the right time, and I had to, if I give myself any credit, it's the credit for saying yes when Peter Strauss came to me out of the blue and asked me, do I want to go into radio? And 7 years later, it's now 1979, I then merged my two loves, radio and the Jewish tradition, to create the first radio magazine with the sound of a typical American talk show. It aired on WMCA, and then it moved to the leading talk station in the United States, WOR, and it was there for years. And then in the 1990s, I added television to it. And since the 1990s, L'Chaim has been a television program that airs every week all over the United States.
Welcome, my friends. Welcome, my friends. Welcome, my friends. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us for another edition, very special edition, pre-Passover edition. Thank you for joining us for another edition of L'Chaim.
Mark became sort of the Walter Cronkite of my world, in that whenever a major Jewish event was happening, it didn't really happen until I saw Mark covering it. I have to say we disagreed passionately at times, but that was all part of the passion that we both shared for Israel and for the Jewish people. But we always made sure that our differences, even when we expressed them, and of course at this table you have to express differences, we're Jewish, but the differences were L'Shem Shamayim, as it says in the Talmud. L'Shem Shamayim, for the sake of heaven. Because beneath all the differences was this unbounded love and mutuality that we shared. At times I feared a little bit that he was veering a little too far to the right, and I probably in his mind was going a little too far to the left. He called me his J Street rabbi. I have to say, my synagogue partnered with JBS and with Mark on bringing many leading lights to speak to the community and to the Jewish world. And perhaps the greatest example of this, and also this example of pluralism, of Mark always wanting to cover all sides of the spectrum, was when we co-produced and brought Alan Dershowitz and J Street's leader Jeremy Ben-Ami together at my synagogue, and Mark drew the short straw, and he moderated that one. Thank God.
Think of how much more effective we would be.
Right,
if
but
we
Alan,
as
soon as I say one word, as soon as we say one word where you don't agree, You call us anti-Israel. As soon as we say one thing and one thing across that 80%, we've gone over to the dark side.
I've called you anti-Israel was when you appeared, and then you pulled back from it, but when you appeared to be supporting the statements that American and Israeli policy...
Alan, the problem is that you
Israeli
are the one...
policy caused the death of American soldiers.
But Alan, we never said that.
Alan, we had an exchange of views. I urge you to read it.
Okay. We have to begin to close this down.
We ended up agreeing.
We ended up agreeing. If you were in my home, we would do this till 3 in the morning, and I would be very happy. Unfortunately, we have to begin to close it down.
Mark always wanted to seek truth through dialogue, and that is and was the Jewish way. But Mark would cut through to the truth. He would get to the core of an issue. He would always use probing questions, and he always knew which questions to ask. And I have to say, he always did his homework. When I came to sit here, having just written a book, immediately within 5 minutes, and we did a 2-hour-long interview, I knew not only had he read the book, he could have written the book. He basically told me what I should have written. And at times, really cut through to some very personal issues regarding what does it mean to be a rabbi, the very personal nature of the choice, my choice to become a rabbi.
You say it was your nightmare to become a rabbi. It sounded when you wrote it like the last thing Josh Harmon would ever do is to become a rabbi. Yeah. Something changed, Josh. I want to know why.
The rabbinate changed me.
But did you become a rabbi before you decided to become a rabbi?
I think everyone...
You decided to go to JTS.
Yes.
The Conservative Movement's Rabbinical School.
Going to school doesn't mean actually realizing this is what you're going to be.
You went to JTS not to be a rabbi?
There are lots of kinds of rabbis. There are writing rabbis, there are organizational rabbis, there are pulpit rabbis.
Was the nightmare...
I didn't go there to become a pulpit rabbi.
Okay, it was a congregational rabbi that was the nightmare.
Right.
It didn't bother you to become a rabbi, but you could not see yourself as a congregational rabbi.
Yeah, I didn't imagine that.
And when did that change?
When I became one.
He didn't just ask, why did you become a rabbi? Everyone always asks that. But he drilled down and deeper and deeper and deeper till we got to some basic truths.
What you end up doing when you go to a community is you start to get enmeshed in the lives of people. And if you can accept them where they are at, and begin to feel the mutuality of human striving. If you're sort of down in the mud with them, as opposed to the shepherd image pulling them along, it can become beautiful.
We got to some basic truths, including the fact that it was with great reluctance that I chose to become a pulpit rabbi. And that choice wasn't a permanent one, but it became permanent because I came to love the people. And Mark understood that because he felt exactly the same way. Basically, the interviews that I did with Mark made me a better person and a better rabbi, and brought out the best in me. And that really is the greatest tribute that one can give to a journalist, that he brings out the best in his subject. And very much a subject. We were I and thou. We were two people schmoozing on a Shabbat afternoon. He did actually say he loved me during an interview, and I was so thrilled. I thought it was sort of cool. And then I found out when I was at his funeral that he said that to several people while he was interviewing them. And in fact, he said that to, I guess, a lot of people, and I'm wondering if he told everyone that he interviewed that he loved them. Whatever he said, I'm sure what he said was authentic and genuine and honest. To Mark, on his yahrtzeit, all I can say, in the words of the song he wrote, is Todah lecha. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're an extraordinary human being. You're a fabulous rabbi, but you're an extraordinary human being. It's been an honor to both know you and be a friend of yours. You're a gift to us, Josh.
And you and JBS are as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
You
You are fabulous. I love you so much. You're an extraordinary human being. Shalom to you, salam to you. I'm in love with you. I am.
I went home and I remember my husband saying, so, he fell in love with you.
He doesn't say that to everyone, I don't think.
Oh, yeah, right.
No.
I adore you, and what a good fortune it was that you're in my life. You're unbelievable. You know, sometimes you look forward to meeting somebody that doesn't quite go as well. You're out of this world. You're fabulous. You are fabulous. You know,
Thank you.
There's no one doing what you're doing. And you know, it's not just that I love you. I can't thank you enough for helping me become who I am.
A unique voice in the Jewish world that cared deeply about the Jewish world. And he was larger than life. He was fueled by his passion, by that connection to and love for Judaism, for the Jewish experience, for our history as a people, for Israel. Todah lecha. Thank you, Mark, for all of that. We miss you. And we are all committed to doing our best to carry on your incredible legacy.
There are passages in Night where you are very honest about the extent to which you feel betrayed, and that there's a question as to whether you will ever forgive God for Night. So I ask you now, at this point in your life, how have you dealt with the issue that you dealt with in the book? There's reference to it in this book. Where is Elie Wiesel now in that journey that every human being takes, except yours was extraordinary?
Even the words that I said, and they are harsh, very harsh words against God's justice or against God's absence or against God's indifference. But next day, I davened again. I didn't stop. But remember, I come from a very religious background. And all of a sudden I see what is being done in His creation. To say that God doesn't know, come on. To say that He doesn't want it, come on. So where is the answer? That's the powerlessness of what we call as the most glorified and glorifying aspect of humanity. The way of thinking. That we can think. And here I realize that thinking doesn't help. It doesn't give me any answer. Only more questions and more and more. At the end I remain with my questions. To accept that, I do.
Don't forget to be an only child in Frankfurt am Main, in an Orthodox Jewish home, where Friday night there was a Shabbat meal, where first I went to synagogue because there were no boys. I was able to go to synagogue with my father. I was able to sit next to my father. Usually girls didn't do that. And I had a very, very happy, wonderful first 10 years of my life.
Were your parents sad? Were you a sad child?
That's a very interesting thing. Yeah, we're talking sadness is a euphemism for depression. It was. I had no cousins. I had no grandparents.
You were alone.
When you're talking, and so were they.
If you fast forward, let's say something contemporary, Holocaust denial. If you ask a denier, why did the Jews make up this story? What's in it for them to make up this myth? Why do they work so hard? The denier has a stark answer for you. What did the Jews, and I put this in quotation marks, get out of the Holocaust?
We start in your film. We see people living a very nice life.
Nice life, yep.
And many of them had money and had, I don't know if they were rich, but they were certainly well-to-do.
They went to 4 o'clock tea.
Yes.
Yeah, they had the
we
fineries.
see them as people.
Right.
And they have children whom they love and they hug and they kiss at night. These are people. And we see in your film the arc of their life, which very often gets lost in the Shoah. We go right to the camp. And it's a process over many years. And your film shows that like no other film I've ever seen.
I think it is the slow process of dehumanization, which is what the Nazis intended. But Mark was on my radar long before I was on his radar. I think this hunger for Jewish content had me watching him or wanting to tune in. Once you watch him, you get hooked. I mean, there was something about his programming and the way he would speak to you. And I think that's what always impressed me. I always felt that he was talking to me, not to an audience, but to one person, me. And I just felt a connection and this warmth and the kind of programming and his sensitivity and this sweetness that he had and his outlook on life. I just felt it was all really very nourishing.
You should feel so wonderful, man. And
Thank you
I
so
hope the
much.
audience, as they listen to this, now want to see it. Everybody should see it.
Everyone who comes on his show or who's interviewed by him feels that because he really had a way of making you feel special. And you said even when he just spoke to the audience, it was very one-on-one.
Yes. And I often say that, not that I do tons and tons of interviews, but that was the absolute best interview I've ever done. He brought the best out in me. He made me look smarter than I am, funnier than I am, and we had this wonderful rapport, which he has with everybody. It wasn't just exclusive of us.
No, but you had, I rewatched most of it, and you said at some point, you're like, this is a love fest, and it felt that way.
It was a love fest.
Yeah.
When it was so cute because we grabbed each other's hands, and he said, I'm falling in love with you.
I'm in love with you. I am.
Well, I told you I'm your fan already, so. It was so genuine. Genuine is the word for him.
No, he meant it.
Yeah.
And this was the thing that was interesting is you came on to speak about your documentary. At that time, it was Who Will Write Our History, which is a Holocaust-themed documentary specifically about the Warsaw Ghetto. He was so impressed by your work.
Yeah.
He said to you, you have done something for the ages. I wrote that down because it was really... And he was someone that was devoted to Holocaust remembrance. He created the show Witness, giving survivors an opportunity to share their testimony. So coming from him, that was like a huge.
I felt guilty even accepting that compliment because I'm one part of the team. Roberta Grossman, is the queen of the film and I'm her partner in it. But I wish that she had been in the room with me because I really wanted everyone on the team to hear that because that is what really makes a person feels so valued with something that they're doing in their work, that their passion is appreciated. And he showed the highest appreciation. He made the audience, he demanded that they watch the film. It was great.
And he always asks his guest about their Jewishness, their upbringing, their childhood, and did you go to synagogue? Did you go just on the high holidays? Did you keep kosher? And you shared some really personal things about your family that were
he's really good at drawing the personal out. That's it. He opens you up. He makes you, you're in this comfort zone where you're sitting with your old friend or a family member and you can share and you don't feel vulnerable. You just feel like somebody cares and wants to hear what you have to say. And that's probably why he was so good at what he did. And because he really took an interest in people. He really took an interest.
He used to say that he wanted his conversations to feel like you're just sitting around a Shabbat table.
Yeah.
And I try and remember that whenever I do an interview. I cannot ever come close to filling his shoes, but that's the tone I think that he set.
Yes, and he did a great job at it. Really great job.
Yeah.
You're now talking a lot about observance. You were not an observant home.
Not an observant home.
Did you feel Jewish at the time, or does that come later in your life?
I felt Jewish for, I did feel Jewish, but not strongly. And I wasn't necessarily proud of it because it just caused me a lot of issues. And when you're in second grade and everybody's working on Christmas decorations and you know, the teacher hands you blue paper, cut out a Magen David just to make you feel good, you know, you don't sort of join in the same thing. But it wasn't because we were observant. But we didn't have Christmas lights, and everybody had Christmas lights. So right there, you feel sad. Christmas lights are fun. You know,
They are. Well, they are.
They are. It's
Yes,
fun, and
of
you know, it
course.
just doesn't hang in blue and white. Just doesn't do it.
Right.
So, but we were involved in other things. We would go camping, and we'd go out into the desert. My brother would make movies, and we were doing you know, we weren't.
Okay, so.
So when you shared those things about your upbringing, was there anything that like affected that afterwards? Did you think about and that surprised you, or that the way it made you feel, or recalling it afterwards that affected you in some way?
You know, when he was listening to me talk about what I'd gone through growing up without, you know, much Jewish identity, first of all, he made me feel that my Jewish journey was normal. It wasn't odd. It wasn't me throwing away my faith or, you know, discarding it. It was a progression, and so I felt so comfortable in the telling of it, comfortable with my own personal journey, sort of because, not that he gave me his bracha, but in a sense I felt that he understood it. Like he was nodding, going, I get it, I get it, I get it. And I think that's also what makes him, you know, what made him so special, is I think he has the ability to understand people from all walks of life that may not think or believe like he does, but he respects them for their own way of handling things, for their own way of handling their Jewishness.
And I think he was just also so deeply cared, as you said, about all the facets of the Jewish experience.
Right. And how many people do that? You know, with Jews being so divided over how they practice or don't practice, and it's divided us, where he opened it up to say we're all one. We all need to understand who we are and accept each other, and because we're the same. We're the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, we just wear different colors clothing, maybe.
Yeah.
That's it.
How did it feel to have the opportunity? Because most opportunities to sit for an hour and talk about a documentary about the Holocaust, it's few and far between.
Right. It was such a treasure. It was, first of all, it was not just about the Holocaust. It was about life. And it covered so many pieces, and it flowed so smoothly. So we may have started with the Holocaust, but when we got into, we even talked about Holocaust and anti-Semitism today. So this was 4 years ago. And at one point I turned to him and I said, do you think, when do we sound I said to him something like, when do we sound the alarms?
Yeah.
Are we close? And he sort of almost smacked me down, saying, no, it won't happen again. And so I keep thinking about that, because the more frightened I am about today's situation, I want his words to continue to ring true. You know, that's it. I want him, and I want wherever he is to make sure that his words continue to ring true. I love Israel. I'm frightened. You know, I'm frightened of what's happening. I'm frightened that with the rise in anti-Semitism, with the Israel bashing, with the people not, there's not even a distinction. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism.
Yes.
There's not. When do we sound the alarms? I mean, you know, what did they do in Germany? When they said, nah.
Here?
Never. Yeah.
No.
It can't happen, right? It can't.
No, and by the way, I'm thinking to myself as I'm watching your film, people who think that there's anything remotely in America, with all of its mishigas and its problems, this, you want to understand what the Shoah is, watch who will write our history.
Right.
And you'll understand all the signs, and it didn't happen overnight.
Right.
And one of the things you have to say is, before the Shoah, no one could imagine it could happen.
Right.
And so it's easy to be critical of Jews who stayed, except we weren't there, and we weren't invested, and we didn't have the perspective.
I thought the same thing when I watched him ask you about that, or you spoke about anti-Semitism today, and anti-Israel sentiment then. This was, again, 2019.
Right.
We are now January 16th of 2024, just over 100 days since the worst atrocity since the Holocaust, the October 7th massacre committed by Hamas, 136 hostages still being held by Hamas. And I've said this so many times, and I've thought this, what would Mark say if he were here?
Right.
I
wish.
Yeah.
I wish we could hear from him. In some ways, when something like this happens, and I think for the most part he was such a positive person in life, that I'm almost glad that he's not here to go through this, because I think it would have really made him very heartsick. But he would have been able to eke out certain gems for us, I think, to hang on to, because I think that's what it is. Whether it is that we've become more cohesive, that we've become more community-based because we need to be, because the forces against us are so furious and they're roiling. They're just this unbridled hatred and spewing and vile, behavior on the streets. It makes us hug each other a little tighter. And maybe he would have said that. Maybe he would have said this is a time where we all have to hug each other a little tighter and just even stand prouder. So
I think
I'm going to
right.
hope. Yeah, I'm going to take that. I'm going to say those remarks, but I'm going to take those with me out into the street.
I'm with you. And I do want to mention you just got back from Israel.
Yeah. So we were there when the war broke out. We were actually with my daughter lives there, and she just had a baby. And
Mazal tov.
Yeah, it was wonderful until that morning, and it was just I'm a Sabbath observer, and my daughter called me, so I knew something was wrong, and she said, "Do you understand what is happening?" And I went, "No," and she said, "Get a weapon and go in the safe room. Terrorists have infiltrated, they're breaking down doors, and they're slaughtering families." And then the alarms were going off in Jerusalem. We're in Jerusalem, she was in Tel Aviv. And so nobody knew exactly where. I didn't understand what territory that was. So, it ended up being really the most terrifying experience. And we're not geared to get a weapon and go lock yourself in a safe room. And for 3 days, we were told, don't leave your home. And then, we started to hear more and more. And of course, we were all completely shaken to our core that the world has gone mad. And it just got madder and madder. And then we actually evacuated, came back, and we asked her to come back with us because her husband was immediately called up, and she's at home with a baby, and nobody had helped. So we came back here. I came back with a lot of guilt that I had left because other people don't have that option. And then I just went back and brought her back and the baby and just spent a few weeks there and felt so good to be there, to do anything, whether it's volunteering, picking fruits and vegetables or feeding soldiers or going to the Kikar Hatufim, which is the hostage square, and just talking to people, meeting with the families, and just letting them know that we are there for them. It was really important. But and then coming back here, and it's frightening in America. This is a scary place.
It's a scary place and a scary time, but I think you're right about what you said about how Mark would respond. That exactly what you said before is letting our fellow Jews know that we are there for them.
Right.
And we carry them in our heart. And it's hard, we're all heartbroken, but we're also so much stronger, I feel like, in our Jewishness and in our unity.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think, and I almost can see him saying it. I can almost see him looking straight at us in the camera in the same way he told everybody, you have to go see this film, and then you have to let me know how you feel about it, that he's saying you have to stay strong, you have to love each other, and this is our way out of this mess, and hopefully we will get to better days. We have to have faith.
Yep, amen to that.
Yeah.
We'll leave it, the theme running through this tribute. One is to give an opportunity to people like yourself who Mark adored and loved having as a guest to remember him and talk about the experience, but also if he were here to give thanks or Todah lecha, sort of thank you to him, and what would you say if he was here?
I would say Todah lo, thanks to him for making me feel like a giant and for validating what I'm doing. When you work and you have passion projects and you hit walls and there's always mountains to climb, and you get that kind of confidence build and that he made me feel, I don't know if I even said it to him, he made me feel like there's something to write on my tombstone, you know, that I did something good for the people of the Jews. And there's nothing else that I could do outside of being good to my family, is to be good to my bigger family, is the Jewish community. So I thank him, and I know that when we lose our daddies, you know, it's tough. They're our North Star. And he was the North Star for so many. He was a father figure for so many people. Everybody who watched him gained from him, gained knowledge and direction, and that's what fathers do. So, you know, he did a great thing, and sadly his life was too short, but he did so much in it. And that will stay. That'll stay a long time.
You may disagree with me, I don't know. I think that the notion that women are valuable, important, should be educated, leaving ritual barriers aside, in general, the Jewish world does want their girls educated. They want them to be as professional as they want to be. Mm-hmm. And there's a sense of encouragement, certainly from my parents on. And my mother was one of the first women ever to go to Columbia Law School.
Wow.
Okay, so I've got that in my background. My grandmother, who also went to Columbia Art School as an older adult and was a major figure in early Jewish education. So that I saw that developing, even though I don't have any sisters. Mm-hmm. I grew up also in the Reconstructionist movement, where Mordechai Kaplan's daughters were the first girls in America to have a bat mitzvah ceremony.
Wow.
But my sense in general is that you don't have an anti-feminist mentality in the average Jewish household. I want to know the extent to which you agree with that. And then the question is, as you and your daughter, as you and your sister, Robin, were growing up, to what extent do you feel you were in some way different than the typical Jewish girls growing up on the Upper West Side?
Yeah. Well, I think it really matters what era you're talking about, because I certainly think that in my mother's era, there was a sexist slant in terms of expectations of what a girl could achieve and how much she should know and learn.
I first came to know Rabbi Mark Golub back in 2014 when he invited me on L'chaim to speak about my Jewish journey and my first book, Stars of David, Prominent Jews Talk About Being Jewish. I was struck by Mark's preparation, his directness, his canny questions, and instant warmth. He felt like an uncle I'd known my whole life.
What was your parsha?
You know, it was from Amor, and...
No. You became bat mitzvah on Seder Amor?
I think.
We share Amor.
Are we kidding me?
Which, by the way, is not a great Seder.
No, it's terrible.
No, it's terrible.
But I did have the corners of the fields. Am I right about
yes,
that?
That's right.
Yes, that's a good line.
Forevermore, we share Amor.
Okay. Have you used that already?
No.
I'm not the first girl you've used that.
No, you're the first
woman.
Girl.
I should say.
We share
Amor.
That's wonderful.
Mark invited me back on his broadcast 3 years later when I wrote My Jewish Year, 18 Holidays, One Wandering Jew. And not only did we take the deep dive together into the glories and challenges of the Jewish calendar, but it was so eminently clear that Mark Golub was a deep scholar of our texts and tradition, not to mention an unparalleled enthusiast when it comes to how Judaism can enrich our lives.
So we're starting with God, seriously,
yes,
Rabbi?
You start with God. You start with God.
You're right, that's fair. But it's interesting because I know we're going to get to the holidays, but not every holiday demands a reckoning with God in the same exact way. I'm sure an Orthodox Jew would say God is in everything. But I found that moving through every holiday, it wasn't always clear to me what I should be learning, if that makes sense, about where God's presence is or the message of God in each holiday. But I know that's a separate thing.
Yes, that does not address my question.
I'm ducking your question. Have you noticed?
You'll never duck. I know you.
My true feeling, and I would not want to be in a position to have to support it, it's just my gut, is that someone is with me and someone is on my shoulder reminding me to be a better person and reminding me that I have some role to play in the world that is not necessarily to perfect it, as the rabbis describe it, but to improve it, to heal it, to repair it.
Excuse me, just a second. I understand that the rabbis say to improve it. Where did you ever find any reference the rabbis say to repair it?
To repair it.
But repair suggests something about the world, which I don't believe the rabbis ever said.
That the world is broken.
Absolutely, that's a Christian notion. By the way, you said it instinctively correctly, and by the way, who am I? I'm just a guy.
You're a rabbi.
Okay.
You have every right.
I'm a rabbi, okay.
What about the splitting open?
What's splitting open? By the way, if you...
That whole Talmudic idea.
It's not Talmudic, it's Kabbalistic.
Okay.
Okay? You read Rabbinic Judaism, the word they say is we, you and I, every human being, has a responsibility to improve the wonderful, beautiful, good world God created. Our job is to improve it, beginning with ourselves. Unfortunately, and this is a tangent, we'll come right back to your book.
It's an interesting one.
I will just say to you as an aside, this is a battle I cannot win. However, a mistake was made. When I grew up, I'm older than you are, when I grew up, the phrase tikkun olam was nowhere. This was a phrase that was created. When I was growing up, it was called social action. That the Jew cared about improving the social living situation of human beings in need. And any Jewish activity that contributed to that was social action. And it began outside the Orthodox movements. It began within Reform and Conservative Judaism. So a Reform synagogue, whether it's Central Synagogue or whether it's Emmanuel, there was a heavy emphasis within the Reform movement especially on social action and fulfilling a prophetic vision. It was never tikkun olam. And tikkun olam comes out of the Kabbalistic tradition where there is a torn curtain. But in Rabbinic Judaism, the idea of repairing suggests human beings did something or God did something. That is, by the way, a Christian notion with original sin. God made a beautiful world, and the first man and woman tore it apart, and now in the Christian tradition, only by one man can the world ever be repaired, and that's with Jesus. Anyway, this was an aside. It's unfair to you because it's not about your book. But you are correct when you said, as you traverse the holiday cycle, you are constantly aware of a Jewish mitzvah, a responsibility to make the world a better place, to improve the world. And the way you said it gave me chills. I love the way you said it.
I will always be grateful that Mark chased me down after those interviews and nudged me every year to join the JBS family and be part of this important hub of Jewish conversation. I finally said yes, and it's been my deepest honor to have my own interview program on JBS and work with an incredible team. It's especially meaningful that we launched my show in the spotlight while Mark was still here to see it. I learned from Rabbi Golub as a Jew, as a journalist, as a mensch. I am proud to be part of the continuation of his legacy of Jewish education in media. Proud to have been a guest on L'Chaim, and proud to share with you in Remembering a Giant, Mark S. Golub.
My wife and I have 3 girls. And
no wonder you're a feminist.
by the way, I think if you are a parent of a daughter,
yes,
you better be a feminist. But it may come more naturally. Maybe it does. But I wanted to say to you that I want my daughters, like every parent, I want them to be happy. You know the old line, you're only as happy as your least happy child, right? Okay. But what I wanted and continue to want from my daughters is that they should have every right, opportunity that my sons have. The fact that they are gender female should in no way limit any choice they want to make. And then, Letty, I want them to choose. I don't want them, they shouldn't choose for me. They shouldn't choose for their mother. They shouldn't choose except for where they want to be. And if they choose to have what is now called a more traditional home or a more traditional life, then that's their choice. But
you know what I did though?
Tell me.
This was in 1970. This was before there was a women's movement, before any of these ordinations took place, including in Reform. Only Mordecai Kaplan's daughter Judith had been bat mitzvah. So,
do you know why? Because Judaism was the first to have a bat mitzvah.
Because
he had daughters.
Because he had
Thank
daughters.
heaven he had
Right,
daughters.
And because Judith was bat mitzvah.
And he was courageous enough to do it.
Many of the viewers may not know that Mark's grandfather was one of the disciples and colleagues of Rabbi Mordecai Kaplan, who influenced all Jews, even though many Jews of the traditional venue, whether it's conservative or Orthodox, rejected his theology. But they were Kaplanian without being Kaplanesque, and the idea that people who differed on so many levels could come together and speak is something that Kaplan wanted, and Jacob Golub wanted, and Mark continued. So when we write the biography of Mark Golub, that's part of the story too. There's a family tradition that he continued and elaborated upon using the modern media.
Jeff's a longtime personal friend whom I've been privileged to have on L'Chaim many times from the very beginning of this series. He's always been a fan favorite. Jeff's an outstanding teacher and raconteur, and it's so wonderful to have you back where you belong in that chair at L'Chaim's desk. Thank you so much for joining us. And it's true, you have been at my side we started in 1979, Jeff. It's been on quite a number of decades already.
Right.
And you've been there every step of the way, and you've been a major, major part of what's made L'Chaim successful. So I'm very grateful to you. What is the unique perspective? It doesn't mean it's a better perspective, but what is the unique perspective when you talk about the fact that you were in a strange land in Cincinnati, Ohio, and that you were viewed by other Jews as a different character of sorts? What's that about? What's it mean? What is the difference? What if I had here Jews from Seattle and Denver and St. Louis and Houston? How do you think they would describe the New York Jew?
So I think one thing that's distinctive about the New York Jew that comes across in the variety of the chapters is that if you live in New York City, particular neighborhoods at different times, you can believe that the whole world is Jewish, even though statistically we never lived in a ghettoized situation. Even on the Lower East Side, there were significant numbers of Christians living among us, and a sense of we belong to the city is ours, and we are part of that. And that creates within a New Yorker a sense of comfort about being a New York Jew, and then transplanted someplace else, you find yourself as a member of a minority group.
So I'm here with Jeff Gorok, one of Mark's oldest friends and one of the most frequent faces our JBS viewers know from L'Chaim. Jeff, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you very much. You know, Mark used to say all the time that I was a fan favorite. Truth of the matter is, he was my favorite, and I had the pleasure of being on his shows many times.
Right.
But in fact, I was on his first radio show. That first incarnation of L'Chaim goes back to the 1970s when we were on WMCA radio, very small listenership. And the first show featured Elie Wiesel, Isaac Bashevis Singer, and 30 Seconds of Me.
Wow.
But the 30 Seconds of Me was very significant in terms of my interest in American Jewish history, which is my field. So what was it? As part of the show, he broadcasted 30 seconds of a yeshiva high school basketball game from Madison Square Garden.
You remember that show, by the way, our first show together?
Yes, we broadcast from Madison Square Garden. I did a 2-second clip of a basketball game between two yeshiva high school schools in New York City. And
at Madison Square Garden?
At Madison Square Garden. It was the highlight of the show.
With Spencer Ross doing the play-by-play.
And Mark used to say all the time that he got a lot of feedback, negative feedback. Why did you waste 30 seconds on a basketball game? And Mark's response was, and it intersects with my own interests, that The game itself, whether who won the game was not important, but listening to the game says something about the American Jewish experience and the role sports played, in this case, in the life of a bunch of Orthodox Jews running up and down the court at Madison Square Garden. And those who know me in terms of my scholarship, the intersection of the personal with the professional, I go back with Mark even before this incarnation. We used to play softball together. His softball team was called the Four Corners, Arbar Confot. He was the pitcher, I was the third baseman.
Speaking to the back, though. Listen, we got a good club, you know. We got this Sephardic kid, Al Guzman here. I mean, we can't get him to go to shul, but he's a pretty good ball player. And
the microphone, please stay on the interviewer. What would you credit for the victory today? What was the real turning point?
The other club had an extraordinarily weak pitching staff.
Mark always dreamed of bringing to L'chaim the fellows who played Friday morning basketball at the Fort Lee Jewish Center, some of who individually have been on the show L'chaim over the years. For example, our dear friend Norman Cohen, who's an expert on Midrash, who's professor of Midrash at the Hebrew Union College. He was on this show. But we played basketball and we talked about Jewish themes when we weren't arguing about the games. But in my scholarship as a professor of American Jewish history, I've written a lot about the significance of sports in the American Jewish context in several ways. First of all, for immigrant Jews, the engagement with sports was one of the ways they proved themselves to be Americans. If you think back to the beginning of the 20th century, President of the United States was Teddy Roosevelt. The iconic picture of him is a man like this, stripped to the waist, and he's an athlete. To be an American is to be an athlete. So one of the things I've written about is the question of Jews embracing sports and what does it mean to immigrant children to love sports and have parents who have no interest in sports. So I've written about that. So ironically, those 30 seconds about the basketball game, unimportant basketball game, was an indication that Mark has a sensitivity to this theme within American Jewish history. So this is not about who wins or loses a game. It's about the importance of sports as defining where we are in the world. And to tell you the truth, the International Olympic Committee has never been favorably disposed towards Medinat Yisrael or towards Jews. And there's another international body that's not disposed favorably towards Jews. It's called the United Nations.
And Mark knew that so well.
And Mark knew all that stuff. So why do...
And I would say he also had a good hunch for the Yeshiva University basketball team years before.
Well, the Yeshiva basketball team is doing very, very well now, and JBS is broadcasting the game. My take on that is the fact that the Yeshiva team is doing well. They have made it to the national championships of Division III, that's small college. Right. And the most interesting thing for me, when people forget about how many games they won, is that when they play in the tournament, the first round game, which takes place on Friday, doesn't start at 8 o'clock in the evening. It starts at 12 noon. The NCAA, which is the overriding body that controls sports, has more rules than the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. But they're accommodating us. It's another barometer of where Jews fit in America. So it's so great that JBS is doing these. Sadly, Mark, who did the first time we broadcasted a game, when they first made the tournament, he was the MC. He was the anchor man from JBS. So, so much of what Mark wanted to do, we're going to try to do as best we can with our limited abilities to fulfill, so many of his dreams. So Mark loves sports. And he played with me, but more importantly, and I beat him more often than not, but it isn't the fact that I beat him, it's the fact that he understood what this element was as far as American Jewish life was concerned. So I think our audience should be very grateful for his sagacity in thinking of these things. And in some respects, I was very fortunate to be a conduit to making a reality of some of his dreams as far as that's concerned.
It's always amazing to see how profound and what kind of a Renaissance man Mark really was. That's an inspiration to us all. I want to ask you to reflect about your friendship over the years, if you have any special memories of that, of Mark throughout those years.
Well, people say that I'm a pretty good lecturer. And I always said to Mark that my abilities to be on camera, and fortunately JBS has not been the only show I've done is the fact that Mark was my Rebbe. Mark was my teacher. And I learned to do this sort of interview by Mark inviting someone who's just starting out in the business to do some of these shows. And I'm very grateful that that is something that he taught me. And when I mentioned to him, he'd say, forget about that, it's not important. But it is important. You have very few teachers in life who are so important to you, and Mark was one of those people. And we had a personal friendship, Ruth and Mark and Pamela and myself. We vacationed together, we traveled together, we enjoyed each other's families for sure. So it's a tremendous loss family-wise as well as professionally, and I can't overestimate the importance of that as far as what would Mark say? I often say to myself when something comes up, how would Mark have handled what's happening today within American Jewish life? And who better to talk to various aspects of American Jewish life with people from disparate backgrounds? That is something that we're going to try very hard to approximate, but nobody can replace Mark Golub.
You know, you mentioned Mark as a teacher, as a rabbi, as a TV personality, and as such, you know, of the many pulpits that Mark held, JBS has been one of the, if not the most prominent one, leading the way forward. From your perspective,
that was a dream fulfilled for Mark. You see, of course he was a rabbi and a communal leader,
Sure, yeah.
but from the very start, when I first knew him, he had this idea of creating real Jewish television. You know, when we had the radio show, my joke is that we had a string and 2 cups on the end.
Right.
Very few people listened to it.
Right.
But from there, it's become a symbol of Jewish unity in a bifurcated community. You know, when we were growing up, there were a few Jewish TV shows, The Eternal Light and things like that. They were okay. They were not provocative, they were not timely, and they were not watched and heard by people from disparate backgrounds, including significant numbers of non-Jews. Right. So all these things are to the credit of Mark and what JBS was all about, and hopefully we will continue this in our own meager way to try to continue the types of things that made JBS and of course Mark very, very special. Right. I must tell you, I've traveled and lectured in different places, and this is when Mark was still around. People would say to me, next time you see Mark Golub on L'chaim, tell him that the people in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, or Allentown, Pennsylvania, which comes to mind immediately, that these people said it was very important that he reached out not only to, you know, people in the New York area, but it was a conduit for Jews all over the country, and that is something we must continue to enlighten people through L'chaim and through JBS generally.
You know, I'd love to end our short chat with a Todah lecha, with a thank you of what comes to your mind as Mark is sitting here with us to say Todah lecha, thank you, Mark.
For bringing all Jews together of different points of view to have a fair and honest and provocative hearing. That is what JBS is all about, and Mark had the unique ability to bring Jews together, and that's what I remember.
And you know that couldn't be more perfect, because that ability of Mark on an individual level has seeped into the organizational culture of JBS. that has been bringing Jewish organizations together. All of them see JBS as a platform, and all of them are welcome to the bonfire of the Jewish family.
And as a board member, I happen to be a board member. I'm on very few boards, but I'm on this board member. I promise you we will endeavor to continue. That's the best thing we can do in terms of highlighting his legacy. And it's a thrill to see how JBS has grown. And I watch your show incessantly. And I marvel at the wealth and breadth of your knowledge and engagement in so many Jewish topics, and topics that are more important in this book, namely the contemporary life of American Jews, how we fit in the world, issues of anti-Semitism. So I'm a good friend and a very, very committed viewer of your show. And everyone should watch the show. And it's really a wonderful contribution. In all seriousness, it's a wonderful contribution to American Jewish life. So congratulations. So I guess we're done.
When it comes to Israel, again, we look, we have a rotating presidency. So for 2 years, there's a Orthodox, then conservative, then Reform, we have Reconstructionist. They have different views on Israel, but they all believe in the right of the Jewish people to have a precious homeland. They may disagree on the peace process. They may disagree on women at the wall, So you try to navigate very carefully, but you always remind people that we're not going to get through this by being a fragmented people. If we're going to address the issue, we better find a place where we're together. We can't do it alone. Look, I say this to our Christian friends. We can't fight anti-Semitism alone as Jews. We need your help. And certainly on Jewish issues, we can't do it alone. And the success of one group is not predicated on the failure of the other. We wouldn't be better off, without a Soloveitchik, without a Leon Beck and a,
to the contrary.
Heschel. Yeah.
To the contrary. We would be diminished.
We'd be
without them.
diminished, but we have to provide the space for people to have those arguments with each other. Look, didn't Hillel and Shammai, they quoted the other person first, right?
Well, Hillel quoted Shammai first.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what is that about? It's showing that, and when I went to law school, you had to study the majority opinion and the minority opinion, right?
That's Talmudic.
That's Talmudic. So we can't lose that. That's who we are as a people. And this one size fits all is zero somewhere. If you don't follow me, then you're outside the camp. We can't afford that.
Okay, but right now we're seeing a fractionalization in the Jewish community. And there is this attitude, I'm right and you're wrong. And it doesn't come from the right alone or the left alone. And I keep saying to myself, how does Job navigate that? And my instinct is there are times when, on a personal basis, you have strong disagreements with your president. You're a person, you have your own ideas, you're profoundly committed to the state of Israel. What do you do with those kind of situations?
It's very painful.
It is.
It is. You can't be honest about who you are, and at the same time hide who you are. And
even though you're the executive vice president?
Well, but there are times when we say, look, we're going to part on this, right? You try to find, again, those issues, where we can collaboratively confront it. But where there's going to be a difference, we're going to be apart from each other. That happens. But the strength of an organization is not only when you agree, it's when you disagree. In a relationship, if you can really disagree with the other person, that's a real substantive relationship.
Okay.
It is said that a friendship is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. I've been very privileged to enjoy the friendship of Rabbi Mark Golub for many years. And even though we've all been impoverished by his passing, we certainly have been enriched by his presence. Years ago, the biographer of Winston Churchill was asked to what he ascribed the greatness of Churchill. The biographer answered 50% intelligence, 50% integrity, 50% independence. The person looked somewhat surprised and said, but that's 150%. To which the biographer answered, you didn't know Churchill. He was more than one person. To me, that was Mark Golub, more than one individual. He loved his faith, he loved his own family, and he loved his JBS family. You know, years ago, I remember having a discussion with him about different types of Jews. And I said to him, my father said to me years ago also, I don't care what kind of Jew you are, just be proud of the Jew that you are. Mark Golub was certainly proud of the Jew that he was, and also respected other Jews who were proud of their Judaism. He was a real pluralistic Jew. We had talked one day about the Jewish symbol on the Israeli flag, the Star of David. And I said, Mark, look at this, 2 triangles going in opposite directions. He said, yeah, that's the condition of the Jewish people quite often. We discuss, we debate, we often take opposite positions, but at the end of the day, we're all on one flag. And I certainly can appreciate during this difficult time in the history of Israel. Very often I find that image and reality are apart from each other. You can see someone on television, but you don't know the real person. With Mark, what you saw on the screen is what you also saw in person. Webster's dictionary said that in 2023, the most popular word was authentic. More people search for the meaning of that word than any other word. And maybe it teaches us that people really want authenticity. If you want to know the example of that, look at Rabbi Mark Golub. Sincere, it comes from 2 Latin words, sina and kera, which means without wax. Years ago, if you wanted to buy a work of sculpture, you would say to the sculptor, I'll buy this on one condition. It's sina kera. It's without wax, because a sculptor would use wax to cover up some of the blemishes. Mark Golub was sina kera. There were no cover-ups. What you saw and what he said was who he was. So I think we should not say that he passed away. I think it's more appropriate to say, thank God he passed our way. In Hebrew, the word for legacy is nachalah. It comes from the word nachal, it means river, because a legacy continues even when a person's life comes to an end. Our legacy is to keep Mark Golub alive, doing all the things he would have wanted to do. I think that's the tribute that he really deserves. Thank you so much for this honor.
I want you to spin a dreidel for us.
Spin a dreidel?
Spin a dreidel for us.
I hope I get Gadol.
Hello, Rabbi Mark Golub. From Yentl to Golda Meir, to Arena Good, from Holocaust to Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Rabbi Mark Golub, you have always been supportive of my work and gave me many opportunities to appear on your broadcast. I am grateful for your presence in my life, and I know that your memory already is a blessing to thousands. Thank you, Mark, for all you did in your time with us. I am very, very lucky to have known you. Sending much love to Gan Eden.
Come with me where dreams are born and time is never planned. Just think of lovely things and your hearts will fly on wings forever in never, never land.
Hello, my friends. I'm Jake Ehrenreich. I'd like to speak to you about my friend, Rabbi Mark Golub. Why am I laughing? I wrote down 100 things I'd like to say about Mark. But you know what? If you don't mind, I'm just going to wing it from the heart. I mean, Mark and I were dear friends. So we worked together, of course, but it was one of the great honors of my life that I counted this extraordinary human being as a dear and trusted friend. And I miss him. I mean, like we all miss him. Especially now. I'd love to be speaking with him, believe me. And I think of all the gifts that Mark was graced with, and there are many, I think his greatest ability was to teach. And I certainly learned so much from him during our relationship. And I continue to learn from him, you know, when I watch him on JBS now. And if I could share a story from my own life, when I was when I performed at Jew Grows in Brooklyn, my show, people will come up to me at the end of the show and share stories, sometimes about my father, because I talk about my dad in the show. And I always think, and my father was an extraordinary person, you know, much like Mark in many ways. I always think how unusual this is that my father is still teaching me through these stories about him, you know, from beyond. And oftentimes my young son would be standing next to me and I thought, wow, my dad's teaching my son, you know, from the grave. That's what I think about when I watch Mark on JBS now. When I watch a L'chaim or an Aleph Bet or one of the symposiums he had with community leaders, I feel like, you know, I'm still learning, you know, and also it's nice to see him as a friend. You know, he has his little quirks that I get to watch and I get a nice feeling out of it. But the level at which he teaches is extraordinary. His intuition and his questions. You know, oftentimes the interviewee on a L'chaim program would come to an epiphany because of what Mark said. That happened to me in our interview together. And I'd like to share a little part of that for you. Here's me and Mark on L'chaim.
So the Catskills were very important just in general, but over the years I came to see, and even more recently, how special they were to us. So we were the Grine, you know, with the immigrant kids, the greenhorns, right? And we played with the American kids, but we had a separate part of the bungalow colony where we stayed.
Just a minute, where were you born?
I was born in Brooklyn.
So why do you say the American kids as if you weren't one of them?
Oh yeah, I was not.
You weren't one of them.
No, of course not.
By the way, one of the themes that you try to help us understand is the distinction that you lived. Your parents were survivors.
Yeah.
My understanding is they were from Poland.
Correct.
They had a nice business when your family was in Poland.
Well, several things. My mother's father was a butcher, but my father's family was extraordinarily wealthy.
They end up swept up in the Holocaust. And where do they end up?
In Siberia.
In Siberia. One of your sisters is born in Siberia.
Correct.
They survived the war. They're in a DP camp. They come to America.
My other sister was born in the DP camp first.
Aha. So you're the youngest of the three children, but you are born in America.
Yes.
You are a naturalized American citizen.
Which means I could run for president.
That's correct. Without any question. Okay. And at the same time, something about your entire family, background, and present as you lived it, made you feel you were apart from Americans. You just said to me, the American kids.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, talk about how that happens and what did it mean for you?
So that's incredible. I mean, it's true. You know, because of Mark's question, of course I was an American kid. I was born in Brooklyn. But the way I identified and the way I spoke about myself was something different. So that was amazing. Look, Mark was the greatest interviewer I have ever encountered anywhere at any time. His insight, his intuition, you know, he did all his work up front. He knew exactly what he was talking about, but that never stopped him from being in the moment. He was always in the moment. And that's why he came up with these extraordinarily insightful questions and comments. And I learned so much just from watching him now. But I think one of the favorite things about his interviews for me is that everyone is marvelous. You're marvelous. Oh, yeah, we're going to put a semicolon here. You're going to come back. Everyone was marvelous. I know Mark. I knew when he didn't agree with what the interviewee was saying. But they were marvelous anyway. And you know what? It was true. It was true for him. He had this unique way of appreciating people, even when they didn't agree with his point of view. He thought their voice was important in Klal Yisrael and for the greater good. That was one of the most amazing things that Mark did. You know, we shared so much in common personally. We loved the Jewish people. We loved our family. Mark really loved his family. We shared theater and music in common. I don't know how many people know that Mark was a Broadway theater producer. I mean, he was nominated for 4 Tonys, and he actually won 2 Tonys. And he was a wonderful musician. I remember the delight he took when he found out that one of the Broadway shows I played on drums was Barnum. I remember the delight he took in telling me that he conducted in the pit of a local performance of Barnum. I think there's actually some video of it around as well. And he was a wonderful musician. I don't know how many people know he wrote the theme song for his show L'chaim. Todah Lecha is his song, which is amazing. Yeah, but I think probably my fondest memories of Mark are from the lavish sushi dinners we would have together on the Upper West Side of Manhattan after we finished taping episodes of the Jake Ehrenreich show at the Triad Theater. So the Jake Ehrenreich show was like the biggest production that JBS had done, even to this day. It was a live audience, live guests, live music, and it was, you know, he was so proud of it. He was always there in the audience. I remember seeing his beaming face. It was so cool. And after, we would go to sushi, right? And his praise was so effusive. He was so happy and proud. His face would light up, and he had this extraordinary laugh that would light up the whole room. It was really wonderful. Boy, I miss my friend. But I don't worry about him. I really don't. You know, I'm one of the few people, as an aside, that I actually spent a little time on the other side. It was years ago. It was a medical mistake, but I was there. I'm one of those people that can tell you the light and the whole thing. And if you ever want to talk to me about it, feel free. Don't be afraid. It's great. I know Mark is in a really good place. No kidding. I don't worry about him, but I miss him, and I worry about his family. And I just want to say to Mark, Kol tufa chatzlacha, as he would say to everybody, well done. And I'll say to you, if you miss him, you want to hear him, watch JBS like I do, and you can get to spend a little time with him. Thanks for letting me share my memories of my friend. God bless you all. Am Yisrael Chai. Stay safe.
I adore you, and what a good fortune it was that you're in my life. It is lovely. You must promise me that I will only put a semicolon, no period here. We have much more to talk about. You'll come back and we'll continue?
Yes, and if I have 3 seconds, I just want to say, which I tell you all the time, I have learned so much from you and from JBS. This is my go-to station. This is such a gift you've given to everyone, and I'm honored to be on.
Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
I first met Mark when I was meeting a friend. He was coming out of a basketball game with a bunch of other guys uptown, and Mark was one of those guys who was playing basketball. Years later, Mark came into my office. I was working in the Jewish community, and he said, Eric, I have a dream. I want to create a Jewish television network. We laughed a little bit. I had told him about some individuals who had tried to do this before him unsuccessfully, or maybe they lasted for a year or 2. But Mark said, no, this is my dream. I'm going to make it happen. And then years later, I was doing a program for the Folksbiene at the Museum of Jewish Heritage. And as I walked out of the program, there was Mark with his crew filming. And he walked up to me and he said, Eric, say a few words. This is Jewish Broadcasting Service. Actually, it was Shalom TV. And Mark, as usual, was just his own amazing self and full of life. And he said, Eric, just say a few words. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing. And that was really the beginning of my relationship with JBS and with Mark. Then Mark subsequently asked me to do Jewish Cinematheque on JBS. and we just had a love affair. Mark, we love you. You are deeply missed. And thank you for having created JPS and for having done everything that you've done.
We live in a time, Michael, when everybody is just rigid in an ideology, and it's almost as if you're not part of that ideology, there's something wrong with you, as opposed to this broad approach. And one of the things we've tried to do here at JBS is say all things Jewish. And I was very lucky, the audience has heard this before, but I was very lucky in that all four of my grandparents came from a different, I shouldn't say it that way. I have every stream of Judaism in my background. My grandfather on my mother's side was an Orthodox rabbi with smicha from the Slobodka Yeshiva in Lithuania. My other grandfather was a colleague of Mordechai Kaplan, helped him found the Reconstructionist movement. I grew up in a conservative household, mainstream Talmud Torah conservative, and I'm the Baal Koreh on Shabbat. My father's the lay leader. And when I decided to become a rabbi, I go to the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, because I philosophically was more comfortable there than I would have been anywhere else. And lo and behold, that gave me a perspective which you are now, you are echoing. And the perspective is, there is no one way to be a Jew. And that every stream of Judaism has strengths and weaknesses, but we're all part of the same Amcha. We're all part of the same people. And you were given that gift of understanding. In some way, it wasn't that you were looking for it, but there it was given to you. And it's interesting to hear you say how much that has shaped who you are as a Jew.
I am a Jew. I am the Jew I am because of that experience and because the rabbinic leaders that were around me also.
The word yahrtzeit comes from Yiddish and German. It's a compound word. Yahrtzeit translates to mean a year's time. Yar means year, and that is where the English word, our English word, comes from. And zeit means time. In Hebrew, we say Yom HaHazkara, which translates to Day of Memorial. Jewish mourning tradition has a long history. The Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, who was born in Aragon in 1194 and died in Jaffa, in Yaffo, in 1270, lays out many of those traditions. He explains how important it is to remember a person and to live your life remembering and following that person's lessons and lifestyle. He says, teach in their name, quote in their name, and continue to pursue traditions in their name. Today, we are honoring the memory of Rabbi Mark Golub, a giant in Jewish life and a trailblazer in Jewish broadcasting, on his first yahrtzeit. It is a humbling day in our lives. But in truth, Rabbi Mark Golub is honored by all of us every single day, every time we turn on JBS TV, listen to a JBS broadcast, watch a presentation on YouTube, or stand before you, as I do, weekly, on Thinking Out Loud with Micah Halpern. Rabbi Mark Golub helped me hone the talent of listening and learning and appreciating people in the most positive of ways. The centrality of Judaism and the Jewish people and the love of Israel was the apex of his life, as it is mine. Baseball, music, and theater were his loves. Judaism was his life. I first met Mark Golub in the early 1980s on, of all places, a basketball court. It was a Friday morning basketball game, sort of a rabbi's Jewish educator's game. On a visit to New York, I was brought in by our mutual mentor, Mel Reesfield. Also on the court were Rabbi Professor Dr. Norman Cohen, Dr. Ian Stern, Eli Rockowitz, Professor Dr. Jeffrey Gurock, Eddie Prince, a team that became a veritable who's who in Jewish education and Jewish life. Years later, one day, several years ago, Rabbi Golub and I were talking in his office right here at the JBS studios in Times Square. It was adorned with his favorite memorabilia. When I reminded him of that game, he jumped up and grabbed a booklet from the bookshelf. In that booklet were the pictures and statistics of each of those players. I was only a guest. Few Jewish leaders have have true vision, and even fewer have the ability to transform that vision into reality. Rabbi Golub had a gift of vision, paired with his ability to transform his vision into a reality. We sit in his studio. We watch his vision. And while we mourn his loss, especially on his yahrtzeit, we keep his dream alive. I have been part of JBS for about 20 years, when it was still Shalom TV. I am witness to the care he gave to every message that flowed through JBS airwaves and every single person who engaged with JBS. He was an extremely open, but he did have his red lines. Unconditionally pro-Israel. That did not mean that he did not or could not offer critique of Israel, but his critique always came out of love. He could not tolerate those who criticized Israel in a way that was destructive, or those who did not support Jewish life in Israel. The great Jewish historian Simon Ravidovich wrote an essay entitled Israel, the Ever-Dying People. It is so insightful that I reread it at least once every year. Ravidovich writes that in Jewish history, every generation sees the upcoming generation as less committed than themselves. They're convinced that the next generation is simply not serious enough, worthy to carry on the mantle of Judaism. Rabbi Golub had faith in future generations. He invested in the future of Judaism and Jewish education through JBS. He believed in investing in popular Jewish education. He wanted to reach the masses, to make Jewish learning and ideas accessible. He wanted to help frame the conversation about Jewish topics and Jewish ideas. I often thought of Rabbi Golub as a conductor of a symphony, finding the harmony by drawing out different voices that he wanted to be heard, and different voices from whom he wanted to learn. And when he said he loved you, he meant it. In the Ramban's writings, again, he writes about eulogies. He prescribes that when you eulogize, you should address the deceased. So let me say to you, Mark, Rabbi Golub, good friend, I know that you are watching with great interest. Let it be known that you taught me well. With great grace, I will forever be grateful. Your memory will always be a blessing because we will continue your teachings. And each time I think of you, I smile and I hear your voice. You are saying l'chaim, to life. Tiyeh nishmato tzrura b'tzrura chaim. May your soul be bound in eternal life.
L'chaim, my friends, to life. Take responsibility, choose life. It's not about heaven. It's not about a miracle from heaven. There are no miracles from heaven. Life is a miracle. Human beings are miraculous. But the way miracles are affected in this world is that somebody takes someone else's hand. Every prayer, as opposed to what Mitchell is saying, for me, every prayer has power, but it has a power as a symbolic message. What's the message? The message of the Unetana Tokef is the verse you just quoted. It's not about a God who decides what is going to happen to us, because in the end, prayer, charity, righteousness averts the severe decree, which means that human beings have in their ability the chance to shape life in a beautiful way, and if they do, the decree is irrelevant.
Correct.
What is relevant is, are we going to be involved in tefillah, tshuva, tzedakah? If we are, then that creates a world of light that Steve describes. And for me, since I believe that's what you really mean, I want rabbis like you to say it. I want rabbis like you to say to your congregation, this prayer is, nobody here should worry that they're going to die by fire or by water or by strangulation.
What makes you so sure?
Nobody, I'm talking to Rachel, nobody here has to worry. I want you to say, what you
Don't
do
say
have,
it.
what you
Don't
do
say
have
it.
to worry about is, do you care enough about teshuvah and tzedakah? And maybe tefillah also.
But I want to go to the first paragraph, the water and the fire, that there are also things that we are doing that is causing that water and that fire.
That's not the prayer, though.
No, but
you are right, but that's not the prayer.
But
you want to interpret it poetically? Yes, do it. I'm not saying don't do it. Right. I'm just saying don't make people think that's what the prayer says or why the prayer is there. If you want to say, here's a prayer, and I will show you a way that it can have meaning to us, kol hakavod, but don't tell them it's literal. Don't let anybody come to your congregation and think there's a God in heaven who has sealed their fate, and whatever they do for the next 11 months, irrelevant. They're either going to die or they're going to live. And if they die, and I've heard people say this to me, you know why he died? He died because it was written during Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur he was going to die. So he died. That is hideous. I don't want any child of mine, any child of yours, any child anywhere. No Jewish child should ever think there's a God who says for in the first 10 days of the year, you're going to live or you're going to die. I don't want any Jewish child to think that. Now that's just me. And you would say to me,
you're a pagan, Golub. There's no question about that, really. But you're nice.
I'm a nice pagan.
Really a nice pagan. And as I said, we have worse than you in my synagogue. So that's not a problem.
And because people will take you literally. How am I a pagan?
You're not a pagan.
Okay, right.
Please. You're not a pagan. A pagan had certain core beliefs. I mean, you're flexible.
Mark was a pioneer, a true pioneer. Not only because he did what no one else had done, and believe me, starting a network was very difficult, but it was how he did it. He did not believe in soundbite journalism. And he did not want panelists on the screen screaming at each other. Now, everyone knows that we Jews are a contentious people. Everyone knows that the reason we survive is to finish the argument. But he believed that you could have in-depth, probing, serious conversations and do so in a civil manner, in a friendly tone. And he did this through the force of his own personality and with his own disarming manner and his very, very considerable and sophisticated skills as an interviewer. And as he often said, the kind of conversations he had, nobody else was having. Mark was many other things as well, a producer of Broadway shows, a lover of baseball, the embodiment of Yiddishkeit, and what I refer to as a trans-denominational rabbi who led a chavurah in Connecticut for 50 years. But this above all, he was the media giant of the Jewish world, and we are all in his debt. Betty, Steve, something to add?
I worked with Mark, I'd say, on JBS, a variety of different programs. L'chaim, you mentioned, we had our once-a-year roundtable in which we reviewed events of the year. I really enjoyed being with him, really, for three different reasons, though. Number one is that Mark was a true pluralist. He assembled around his table people to his right and people to his left. What you mentioned, Eric, about civility is very important here. It's a rare commodity in Jewish life, rare commodity in American society as a whole. Mark, in effect, was role modeling for us. How can we disagree while at the same time have a mutual relationship in which we respect each other's opinions? One of the letters Mark got after one program around Thanksgiving was a letter that said, "It's amazing how the respect that your guests have for one another." I appreciate that enormously. There were people I disagreed with, sometimes very vigorously, but I really enjoyed the encounter rather than being a painful encounter of divisions between Jews. Secondly, Mark was a true believer in Jewish peoplehood. In that sense, if I had to give him a nickname, I would have said Klal Yisrael Nick. That not only is he a pluralist, but he embraced the Jews as a people. Again, we can all say that we believe in the Jewish people, we believe in its history, in its future, in its present. Many of us often live in relatively sheltered environments. We speak to the people that we're comfortable with. Mark was always asking, how do we advance the collective interests of the Jewish people? Thirdly, and again you alluded to this, but just to expand upon it for a second, Eric, is that as an interviewer, Mark did not believe in softball questions. He sat there as the anchor person, if you will, and if you said something, don't expect not to be challenged. Don't expect that he would simply move on to another guest or another question, another topic. He would probe and say, what does that really mean? Or better yet, is there a counter-argument? The worst was he said, you yourself have made that counter-argument on this program. So I had to look through my mental archives of what did I say and when did I say it and what do I still believe in. So in that respect, to be on the set with Mark was a dynamic experience in which your thoughts were being challenged and being stimulated. And at the same time, I think I was a better guest for it. I prospered because of him. So in that sense, I miss him. I think his presence filled up the room in so many different ways. The Jewish people miss him because those qualities of peoplehood, pluralism, and a willingness to ask the difficult questions, these are the things we really need in Jewish life.
I think you both have hit the mark, so to speak, no pun intended, but I agree with you completely. I would add just a little bit. Mark also agreed in education, and he believed that our that the Jewish people need to be educated, and not only on the current events, which were the issues that we discussed every year at our roundtable, but as well as many basic tenets of Judaism, which he felt that many people did really not know about. And so not only was our program important in order to inform and keep people abreast of what the concerns are currently, but I think also, if you looked back on the L'chaim program and the whole series, there were also basic programs on what is Shabbat, what is Pesach, what is Purim, what are all these things that many Jews across the United States did not have a firm grasp of.
As you were young with your family, before any of the night descended upon you, what was Shabbat for Eli Wiesel's family?
It was an act of generosity. First of all, God's, and then our own.
He saw the television, this cable television network, as you mentioned, a beautiful way and a harmless way of teaching people who may or may not have gone to any Hebrew school or have had any Jewish background. The other thing that I think, and Steve, what you said regarding the pluralistic society, I also always felt respected. You felt he was trying to understand you, and I guess that's why he asked the probing questions. But I think you were right. He was able to foster that kind of understanding atmosphere amongst all of us, because basically we used to sit around the table, 2 and 2, 2 on the right, 2 on the left, and Mark in the middle. And he was very skilled at drawing all of us out. He was very skilled at making all of us feel at home. And yes, I would agree with that. He was very skilled at bringing an atmosphere, which I think is so much missing now. I miss him for that. I miss it now in the dialogues that we are holding in the Jewish community, which I think, given the date of this taping, has abated somewhat since the Jewish people feel together in the difficult times that we're undergoing because of the war. But still, there was a way to have people speak to one another that, yes, was not only necessary for us to set an example for the whole Jewish community, but I think you said outside, Eric, the country as a whole. It's missing in the country as a whole. And I think you said it as well, Steve. So, yeah, he's missed. He really is.
He is missed. Probing, tough, insistent, and yet civil. That's a hard mix, and Mark pulled it off week after week, because that simply is who he was. And just to pick up for a minute on what Betty said, Mark was an issues guy, cared deeply and profoundly about the Jewish world. He knew the issues, and he was also, at the same time, a wonderful rabbi and teacher, an extraordinary teacher. And my first rabbinic position, when I was teaching Hebrew to adults, I couldn't find an appropriate text. And Mark gave me a text that he had written himself. That was a wonderful document, and it worked. But one example of many of how interacting with Jews one-to-one, not as leader or moderator, but as rabbi and teacher and guide, he was marvelous and extraordinary. And he used to say that his chavurah was the longest functioning chavurah in the United States, and I think that's true. He was assertive, had a vision, believed in the American Jewish community, and was confident about what we could accomplish. We're thankful to him for that, as we are thankful to him for all that he did. We remember his pioneering vision. We remember his accomplishments in the area of media. We, as we look ahead, we're going to build on the foundation that he has created for us.
I will cheer. I will be with them in some kind of profound spiritual sense. The Midrash talks about the Shekhinah always walking at the right hand of a human being. And every now and then we sense what we're doing is important. What we're doing makes a difference in people's lives. What we're doing gives them meaning, gives them a sense of worth of themselves. And every time we do that, there's a Shekhinah there saying yes, yes, yes. And even when we do something and it's not in our self-interest, we do it anyway because it's right. And right changes. Whatever right is, we become more and more sophisticated about what good and bad are. But the genius of the tradition is thus understanding of where human beings play the role. That ultimately we stand against the entire universe and say, we will accept it and we will make it better. And in some way we will even hold it to account. So at the end of the story, God says to Abraham, every Rosh Hashanah, get Ken and Brian up on that stage and blow the shofar. It will reach the heavens. It will change the heavens. It'll change you and your life for good. That's the poetry of the Akedah, the end of the story. May this be the way in which we embrace life also this year. That we will do everything we can, to be creative, healing, lovely human beings who make the life of the people we love the most sweeter and lovelier and more wonderful. And we all say,
tonight we pay tribute to an incredible man with a vision, Rabbi Mark Golub. He believed in Klal Yisrael, in all Jews coming together as one big community. That is what he did in his incredible work. And I can't help but think how he would be a unifying voice and a comforting voice during these times.
Todah Lecha is a song of thanks and of praise composed by our Father. And we're so privileged to perform it tonight with the wonderful musical team of Central Synagogue in honor and in celebration of Rabbi Golub. Todah lecha, Todah lecha, uvechol yom azamera ki liman chastecha nirani
רבים אומרים לי, אינך ישועתי, ואתה מגן בדי, ראשי מרים. תודה לך, תודה לך, ובכל יום ארננה, וקולי עדיך, תודה לך. תודה לך, תודה לך, תהילתך עשה פרה, ובכל הנשמה תהלל יה. תודה לך, תודה לך, לך תבל ביושבך, בעבור ישועתך, תודה לך. ויבטחו בך יודעי שמך, כי לא עזבת דורשך. תודה לך, תודה לך, ובכל יום אהבלה, ועל כן אודך, תודה לך. תודה לך.
Wow. What can I say about what we've all just seen? Fascinating, powerful, gripping. You've heard from Mark, brought back to life through JBS. You've heard from just some of Mark's many special and devoted friends. Quite simply, there was no one like Mark S. Golub in the Jewish world. It's no exaggeration to say that every day we miss his presence, his leadership, his penetrating questions, his thoughtful insights. But what we can learn and take with us is tremendous. It's literally a vast archive. It's a wealth of Jewish conversation and teaching that will guide us well into the future. And it was all done in the spirit of Mark S. Golub, through inclusivity, through pluralism, through warmth, and above all, an Ohev Yisrael spirit that we need on American television now and frankly forever. JBS, your JBS, this JBS is a television channel in Mark's image. Quite simply, it's the public square of the American Jewish community. And here at JBS, we honor this vision and legacy each and every day. It sounds so hopelessly inadequate for the occasion, but Todah lecha, Mark, my friend. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Zecher Tzadik Livracha, as we say in the Jewish tradition. May the memory of Mark S. Golub, your friend, your guide, my friend and my guide, forever be for a blessing.